to the THSI Tech Deep Dive Conference 5th edition, the conference theme session, panel number 3, which is on harmonization of standards, lessons learned from 5G and the way forward. This session will be moderated by Mr. Rahul Vats from Airtel. This session will discuss the 5G standardization experience, especially involvement of diverse regions, lessons learned, and come out with recommendations on how we can leverage these to foster an environment of greater mutual collaboration and alignment of efforts. We have in this panel Professor Abhay Karandikar, former chair TSTSI and currently serving as the director IIT Kanpur, Mr. Dirk Weiler from ETSI, Mr. Hideyuki Iwata from TTC, Mr. Jacques Flouet from TIA, Mr. Dr. Casey Koo from TTA, Ms. Madeline Noland from ATSC, Mrs. Inui Wang from CCSA. I welcome you all to the panel. We are joining in online mode. Can we have a confirmation that all the panelists that I've listed are there online? Asif, can I get a confirmation? Thank you. I can see them. I can see them. I'll quickly introduce all the panelists. So the panel is being chaired by Mr. Rahul Vats. Rahul Vats is the Chief Regulatory Officer at India and South Asia from Bharti Airtel. He's also Director, OneWeb India, and the Vice Chair of India Space Association. A telecom industry veteran with over 25 years of experience with leading corporations, Rahul is an expert on telecom licensing, economic regulations, spectrum management, and regulatory litigation. He has actively shaped public policy discussion in emerging areas such as data privacy, M2M and IoT, and content self-regulation. Thank you very much, Rahul, for making time for this panel.
Thank you, sir.
And I'll quickly introduce the panelists. Professor Abhay Karandikar is currently the Director IIT Kanpur, one of the premier technical institutes of India. Before joining IIT Kanpur as a director in April 2018, he served as Institute Chair Professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering at IIT Bombay. He also served as Dean Faculty Affairs and Head of the Electrical Engineering Department at IIT Bombay. He spearheaded a national effort in setting up the Telecommunication Standards Development Society India, US. And he also served as a vice chair and then later as a chair of TSTSI. He was also member part-time of the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, TRAI, from Jan 2017 till Jan 2020. He serves on the board of several companies and has founded and mentored startups in telecom and networking. Thank you, Professor Karandikar, for making time. Next, we have Mr. Dirk Weiler. Dirk is the chair of the ETSI board, ETSI representative to the European Commission's ICT Standardization and Multi-Stakeholder Platform, Vice Chair of the German Bitkom Working Group Standardization, member of the Senelec ETSI Joint Presidents Group, and member of the German DIN Presidential Committee Focus ICT. He is head of standards policy in Nokia, responsible for standardization policy and membership portfolio. Thank you, Dirk, for joining us. Next, we have Mr. Hideyuki Iwata-san. Dr. Iwata is now the Chief Executive Officer and Senior Vice President of TTC, the Telecommunication Technology Committee, Japan, since 2021. He joined NTT in 1991. He contributed to the commercialization of underground 1,000 optical fiber cable and S2 stranded slot aerial optical fiber cable for fiber to the home. He has been in charge of standardization at the NTT Group for many years. Thank you, Iwata-san, for joining us. We have Jacques Flouet from the US representing TIA today with us. Jacques has over 30 years of telecommunications industry experience in wireless, optical, and wireline networks. He's held various leadership positions in the engineering teams of Nortel and Ericsson. Since joining TIA, he has been involved in 5G, service assurance, smart buildings, and for the last 3 years in the evolution of the data centers. Jacques leads industry working groups that are responsible for the development and evolution of the TI Data Center Certification Program. Thank you, Jacques, for joining us.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Kyung Chul Koo from TTA. Dr. Koo is a vice president of the Telecommunications Technology Association TTA in South Korea. He has been involved in the field of ICT standardization for over 30 years. Thank you, Dr. Koo, for joining us. Next, we have Ms. Madeline Noland. Madeline is the president of the Advanced Television Systems Committee Incorporated, widely respected for her consensus building leadership style. She chaired the ATSC technology group that oversees the ATSC 3.0 next generation broadcast standard before being named the ATSC president in May 2019. Previously, she chaired various ATSC 3.0 related specialist groups, ad hoc groups, and implementation teams since 2012. Thank you, Ms. Nolan, for joining us. And then we have Mr. Zinui Wong. Zinui is currently the General Manager of Standardization and Industrial Relations in charge of telecommunication technology innovation, standardization, strategy and industrial relations building, Vice President of the ZTE Corporation. Thank you very much, Mr. Wong, for joining us. And with that, I hand over to Rahul for
Thank you,
starting the
Bindu,
proceedings.
a lot for this. So, as you would have seen, we have got a very distinguished panel to discuss this topic of standardization. What is it that we have learned from 5G, and what is really the road ahead? Let me just try and set up some context here from, let's say, a business perspective, and how do we see it from an operator lens, and then really get a deep dive into this subject. So as far as we are concerned in India, it has been quite a long road for us in 5G. We had the 5G level committee, high level committee, which was set up more than 5 years ago. And after a lot of deliberations, after a pandemic in between, so this is where we are. We have the auction, and no, we are on the road for 5G rollouts now. But along the way, what has happened in our country is that I think there has been a very a robust discussion, at least on standards, between bodies like the TSDSI, the tech developers, the ecosystem players, the device manufacturers, and across the world. I think this discussion has been quite wide ranging. I know throughout the day there have been a lot of discussions which have taken place, particularly on importance of achieving SDGs, of hard coding sustainability into standards, and what 6G stands for. But
Mhm.
this panel, as we know, it's focused on key 5G learnings, why the harmonization, and how do we really achieve the harmonization, going ahead. So we all know that 5G today is a trusted, commercially viable technology. More than 130 countries across the globe are already on it, already using it. And I think what are the key parameters for any technology to be a global force is that it should meet certain thresholds, thresholds on affordability, thresholds on access, interoperability, security, and also bring the entire technology value chain into the picture. Uh, in our country, we are aware that we are a very low ARPU country, although the paradox is we are also the largest data consumers in the world, right? And given our ambitions for being a technology leader across the world, we really have our challenges quite clearly specified. Uh, in India, I think, and kudos to Pamela and to your entire team, TSDSI has really led this journey. You have been partners to 3GPP in the past, with special focus on rural enhanced broadband. There has been a lot of work done on low mobility, large cell, and most importantly, the 5G-I, which was included into the ITU as one of the proposed 5G technologies. So we have already taken large steps. And as the balance of power is now undergoing a redistribution across the globe, I think more industries are getting connected, and harmonization hence becomes a very important force as we start going ahead. Harmonization is also key for ensuring that we have a very effective deployment, of the technologies across the globe. It's also important to ensure that we avoid, premature redundancy of existing technologies, because after all, businesses have to recover their money and capital. And lastly, also the security architecture should be strong with minimal loopholes. So that's why harmonization is important. So I'm glad to say that today we have got a panel which is really the best we could have got on this subject. People who have actually developed the core technologies, people who have incorporated the connectivity technology into their products, and I think people who are overall being responsible for 5G and IoT M2M. So, with this, I hope that the panel will be able to share their experiences from the 5G standard cycle, and also they'll be able to guide us as we head towards 6G, why harmonization remains so important. So let me go directly to the panel now. And Bindu has already introduced the panel to all of you. Let me start by asking maybe each of the panelists, maybe a minute or two, if they can really delve, into the subject and try to give their personal experiences on 5G standards. What really stands out for each one of you? Also, are you happy with the pace of the 5G rollouts? Are there any regrets which you think are there as far as 5G is concerned? So let me start maybe by asking Dr. Karandikar if he can, give his thoughts on it. A minute or two for each of the panelists. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, Rahul. I just wanted to say, as you had mentioned in the beginning, that from the Indian perspective, when the 5G standardization began, we had at that point of time, India always had the low fixed broadband penetration, and we have always viewed cellular wireless communication as the primary broadband access mechanism, unlike in the rest of the world where fiber is available up to the home, and then in the home or in enterprises or in offices you can use Wi-Fi. In India, the cellular broadband communication remains as a primary broadband access mechanism, and therefore it is important that for us, there are certain requirements which need to go into the technology development and standardization, so that we could achieve the goal of large scale penetration and affordability. And in that context, we had discussed it in the TSTSI and various other forums. The need for standards which caters to large coverage area support in the rural India, and also spectrally efficient and high throughput and energy efficient technology which can work more at fixed access and low mobility rather than very high speed mobility, because really speaking, we were looking for the technology to address the our primary broadband access mechanism. And with this view in mind, I think from TSDSI, we had started participating in 3GPP, and India has pushed its requirement and also the technologies which could fulfill these requirements. I do not want to go into the details of all these things, but from the context of this panel, I would say that we have come a long way through the discussion and have indeed been able to harmonize some of these requirements with the rest of the world, as not only these are essential in the Indian context, but it also help in developing a spectrally efficient and energy efficient technology for the other parts of the world as well. And now I believe with the 5G deployment, we should be able to accelerate our broadband coverage, and then look forward to beyond 5G or 6G technologies, where I believe that merging our requirements with the other world requirements and harmonizing both in terms of technology and spectrum would really benefit the entire globe. So I think, thank you very much. I will come back again, but this is just my beginning remarks.
Thank you, Professor. Always enlightening to hear from you. May I ask Dr. Ku to please share his experiences? Casey?
It's me. For me,
Yeah, that's right.
okay. Thank you. I just surprised the second panelist for me. Anyway, thank you very much for inviting this precious workshop. I just briefly introduce in the Korean situation. As you almost well know, South Korea is the one of the countries which have well-developed digital infrastructure. So Korea actively participates in the GPP. So in that sense, we were the first to commercialize the one of the were the first. Mm. But fortunately, just 5G is still suffer from some deployment. I When it comes to 5G learns before the first as for a service. Uh, as you know, all of the country, as know, new network technology driven. You know, it's 5G killer application still unclear. In Korea also same. And another one is latency. Air latency is reduced as planned, but end-to-end reduction is marginal. You know, it's so I don't know. We will focusing on more some the end-to-end marginal, and another one is the millimeter wave. Korea also focusing on the millimeter wave, especially 28 gigahertz. But in Korea, still unclear. Now we now apply to local 5G, especially in a, in a dedicated site, small farm or small factory, something like that. Another one is that recently all IMs of TTA said that uh, vision and requirements of 5G. We should understand common understanding for technical and vision is needed. Just avoiding the myth, you know. There is the our some difficulty in deployment of the 5G. So now in Korea, focusing on the some two areas. The first one is that I already said that local 5G. Government already located some frequency, maybe many countries also deploy that kind of the 5G local. And another one is the some rural area, not is LMNC, but the kind of share equipment in the rural area, regardless of the mobile operator. Two things are focused by the government and the private sector. That is my brief explanation.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you. So I get it. You're saying that we are still on a journey as far as 5G is concerned, and very correctly put. Can I ask Mr. Jack Flute to also express his views?
Yes, 5G has been a game changer for us in the data center industry with the data center standards evolution. The concept of low latency and much higher throughput and enabling those very high performance applications with 5G has had an impact on the data center industry, moving more capacity towards the edge, starting the new concept of having edge data centers to be able to process the data closer to the end users. It has impact also on improving the reliability of all the services. 5G will be requiring a much higher reliability at the service level, not only at the overall availability of the transaction of the data centers, but at the performance of the data centers as well. So that's a new spin to it. And we're also seeing as part of it's also part of 5G, but it's also part of all the societal evolution, a big push on sustainability. So looking at how we can how we can be much more efficient in an industry that consumes a lot of electricity. So it's very, very important for us to look at new possibility for cooling servers, improving the efficiency of the computing that is required with the new services as this computing keeps on increasing. So all of that is forcing us to evolve on the standard side and be able to look at it from a different perspective, which is going to be great for 5G and then in the future 6G as well.
Thank you, Dr. Jack. Madeline, you come from a background of broadcasting standards. So, what's your take on 5G, and what are really the high points and regrets, if any, on the 5G journey?
Thank you so much. Well, certainly no regrets, I shouldn't think, on the 5G journey. I think that one of the important things about 5G, which is different from previous standards, is that 5G was envisioned as an ecosystem of radio access technologies, which includes not just 5G, but also, for example, Wi-Fi and satellite. And the work that's happened within the 3GPP to include those other radio access technologies in the sort of overall sphere of the standard and the ecosystem, sort of like a network of networks almost. So, looking at going forward with connectivity, we know that sustainability is important. We know that reaching rural audiences is important. And the expectation is that broadcast technologies can help achieve these goals. And so we're quite excited that the 3GPP has a new study item now to incorporate broadcast technologies into the 5G ecosystem. And that's something that we think is quite important to going forward. Thinking about sustainability, the broadcast network, the DTT network, is probably the most sustainable way for certain use cases, the use cases where you have a lot of data going to a lot of the same devices. Distance education is a good use case, for example. So broadcast technologies have a place in the ecosystem, and we're very pleased to be working closely with other SDOs to harmonize those systems so that they can be brought to the people, both in the rural areas and the city areas, those that can afford and cannot afford broadband connectivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. May I ask Dr. Iwata to also share his views on 5G?
Okay, in Japan, in Japan, the structure is like that of the ITUT. TTC in charge of the standardization of fixed network, and I live in the radio network. Please understand our situations. In Japan, it's slowly expanded 5G network. Now with the government to promote to the local 5G POC. Also to the we are discussing beyond 5G, establishing consortium supported by the government. Personally, as users are more aware of the SDGs and environment issues, reducing the CO2 emission than before. CGP also to the sector will be required from the rule to fulfill its social responsibilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Iwata. Dirk Weiler, pleased to hear from you too.
Yes, sure. Thank you, and thanks for having me here. It's my pleasure. I want to span maybe a bigger picture where which led us to 5G, and that might be helpful for the ongoing discussion. I mean, I started technical standardization work in the 80s in the GSM system, and was responsible for Siemens mobile standards when we created 3GPP to um, to expand from Europe to the world. And since then, I'm accompanying 3GPP on its journey from a telephone system like GSM to 3G, a data system where nobody really knew what to do with the data and how the business case should look like, to LTE, which allowed us to monetize and create new use cases, and now to 5G, where you have so many inputs from so many sources, from so many industries. Broadcast and satellite was already mentioned, but you have automotive industry in the meantime with us, connected devices, manufacturing, all of them are today have contributed to the definition of 5G. And I'm also very pleased that we can have here in TSDSI such a discussion, because I remember in 2011 when I came to India and first time met my friend Abhay Karandikar to discuss the NTP 2011 to create a SDO for India, Telecom SDO. And I was at the inaugural launch event of TSDSI in November 2013, where we were so pleased that we have India as a partner on board in 3GPP. And I think what we could see from 5G, that for this development, that we have been able in 3GPP to include all these different and diverging interests in a good way so that we can serve all these industries. And I think we should be very careful in uh, believing in a global standardization system with completely open input, with open being open to everybody, not being dominated by one particular interest. And I'm convinced that going forward, this will also allow us to go from 5G to the next endeavor, which has just started with collaborative research on 6G. Again, on this collaborative research, not only in one country, but this research is also coordinated between the different regions and countries. And I hope we can work all together that we make this also happen from standards.
Thank you, Dirk, for jogging our memories and to the birth of the TSI itself. It's been a long road journey, as I said, but really substantial gains have been done out here. May I now turn to Xinhui Wang? A lot of experience coming out of China. Happy to hear you, sir.
Oh, thank you. I do want to share. I heard some echo. I'm not sure if that's okay for me to keep doing. Okay, I just
That's
go ahead.
fine. That's fine.
Good. Okay, thank you. I just want to share some figures of something happened at 5G deployment in this nation, which I'm living in right now. By the end of October, we deployed around 2 million base stations of 5G, which takes around 70% of the world's total. In addition to this huge amount of this, I would say, 5G base stations, we just deployed more than 6,500 5G vertical networks, which some people say this is a non-public network, which is for vertical delicately. And then from culture-wide point of view, normally I can say all the prefecture level cities and culture level cities in China have been deployed and covered by 5G. That's for sure. With all these exciting figures on the table, I would say at least we can thank 3PP, thank this globally harmonized and international recognized standard. We have been done with 15, 16, and 17, which combined we call this phase one of 5G. Now we're pretty much at the very beginning stage of release 18. We call this the first release of 5G advanced, which is stage two of 5G standard. That's I would say that's pretty good. But we can't always rest on the laurel. We gotta learn something from the, I would say, historical standard experiences. Nothing is 100% perfect. At least from my point of view, I've been doing the 5G standard from day one. It was almost 7 years ago. At that time, people were quite keen to make the first release being done in a very short time. But at the meantime, people in 3P I would just want to, I would say, accommodate as much as possible a different, needs or requirements from different regions of the world, and then it eventually resulted it's, I would say, it's a combined, it's a huge, I would say, release, which is early job, second job, and late job of release 15. Combined, we took almost 2 years to get the first release of 5G done, which is release 15. So at least we're gonna learn something from this very beginning. When we're doing some next generation standardization, we got to do our, I would say, planning job very, very carefully at day one, and then try to make sure we are doing a reasonable plan to accommodate as much as possible, I would say, needs with diversity from different regions of the world. That is actually something I want to share with this audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Shinoy. That's really very interesting to hear this perspective. So now, given that we are already running quite behind our schedule, what I will try to do is I'll try to get into a question answer sort of uh, ask specific questions to you, to each of the panelists, and let's see how far we go with that. So let me start with you, Madeline. As you are aware, 5G has opened the doors for IoT and M2M connectivity. And then within your industry, traditional broadcasters are also developing the B2B verticals. All this means that it's just not telecom equipment that is connecting, it is also cars, appliances, infrastructure in the city, digital signages also. So what is the challenge does this pose for the connectivity standards? Also, how have standard discussion catered to the demand of these very varied industries? And lastly, how are these manufacturers scoping this connectivity in their core product development? If you can throw some light on that.
Sure. Thank you so much. I think that the B2B verticals are being developed as the other panelists were talking about, watching 3GPP or GSM changed from a telecommunications to the full B2B circle of data delivery. And the same is true in the broadcast industry. In terms of the various manufacturers of equipment, whether they be the Internet of Things, agriculture, signage, etc. I think that there are a couple of driving factors as to whether or not you want to develop your device to have a variety of different communication mechanisms inside it. Take, for example, smart road infrastructure, where you might have emergency messages on the roadside available for the motorists to know what's going on. These kinds of devices might have 4 or 5 radio communications networks built into them. Same thing with cars. So you've got an FM radio, you've got a satellite radio, you've got 5G, you've got Wi-Fi inside the car, you've got Bluetooth inside the car. I mean, there's so many radio technologies that are built into these devices these days. And I think from the device manufacturer, it is a little bit of a business question. How much does it cost to incorporate another radio technology? And what are the benefits available? What are the consumers looking for? Who are buying my devices? In the case of, for example, cars, it's consumers that are buying the devices. In the US, in the case of cell phones, it's actually the operators that are buying the devices, then for resale to the consumers. So it's really a business question. And I think the other piece, though, that goes along with this is that we can't just scope it as a business question. It also needs to be a question of the public and the community and the service. So would you want to, for example, put a radio communication network in a car that delivers emergency messages better than any other, and in times of disaster when no other networks are up? So the answer to that question might be yes. For the purposes of the good of the public, we should add this other radio access network into this particular device. So I think that there are a couple of factors that are influencing the device manufacturers, whether they be cell phones or tractors or signage or home appliances, who knows. One, of course, is the business equation, and the other is what is good for the public. And I think the last thing that people need to think about is what is the use case? If you are trying to do unicast communications, then you would need a two-way network. If you're trying to bring a lot of data to the same types of devices in a large region, many, many devices, you're probably better off with a broadcast network. So I think the use cases, the business needs, and the needs of the general public all come into play when manufacturers think about what to build into their products.
Thank you, Madeline. Very interesting. So basically, you said that it's actually the society and the development and the needs which are really, powering on this entire ecosystem. So thank you very much for the views. May I now turn to Dirk Weiler? Dirk, with every technology cycle, the industry and the SDOs under the aegis of 3GPP are getting more proficient in delivering standards based on the standards set by the guidance given by the ITU. At the same time, we are seeing movements like ORAN and telecom infra projects which are gaining pace. So my question to you is, how are the Open RAN standardization panning out? As Open RAN effectively means disaggregating the network elements and integrating them seamlessly into networks. Also, do you see convergence of interests for development of 6G standards, or do you think MNOs will have to make some difficult choices ahead?
Thank you very much for this very interesting question. Um, I mean, Open RAN is a very interesting movement, opening up further uh, interfaces and parts of the network. Um, Today, we have, of course, a very open system with 3GPP where many network elements interfaces are already standardized in 3GPP. And what we can see is that it is Open RAN is an addition for us to 5G networks. It's not a completely new revolution. It poses opportunities and challenges for both um, the operators and of course also the vendors, because the vendors have optimized their current equipment based on the 3GPP specifications in terms of energy consumption, security, latency, and other topics. And we see, of course, this is taking time when you implement Open RAN standards, specifications that from the current deployment of Open RAN, I think there are still some of these deficiencies which will be overcome, I'm pretty sure. We also see that there are currently questions raised whether the structure of the organizations specifying Open RAN is fully in line with the WTTBT principles for standards bodies. And ETSI is cooperating with, for example, the ORAN Alliance to recognize their specifications via the ETSI PAS process, so publicly available specifications, so that they can flawlessly be used in Europe also for public procurement. And what we see is that while Open RAN is of course looking for the future and looking on already to how they can contribute to 6G, we see that we expect that certain elements of the specifications coming from in the Open RAN architecture will make their way into 3GPP when the industry integrates them, because it's important that 3GPP and 5G system and going on to 6G is not a specification of certain interfaces. It's a complete system, and for keeping the integrity of the system, you need to integrate at least certain parts of such specifications. And how good we will manage to do that, and the industry players will manage to do that, that will then also answer better your question whether the MNOs will have to make difficult choices. So far, I'm convinced that 3GPP also remains the place for 6G standards. We have shown, and that's why I started my previous intervention with this journey of 3GPP, where we always faced really big challenges to integrate more and more. And I'm convinced that also for 6G, this integration will happen in a successful way, and we that this system will remain intact, so that the MNOs will have uh, a system which work and not being made of choices. You have to make choices which you don't like. Of course, it is not on that must also be recognized. 5G already, but also 6G is not only for MNOs. It is so much broader that also others, enterprises, are using them. And nevertheless, also here, I think 3GPP will be able to deliver its promise to all the stakeholders which need these standards. Thank you.
I think you are muted, Rahul. Your hall is muted, so we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So continuing with this theme, I'll turn to Dr. Iwata and ask him, the standard making process. Uh, while we all work towards a common minimum specifications to get the core benefits, but we have seen in the past the priorities of the market, industries, and the competitors do collide. And in such cases, what is the best practice to determine what needs to be sitting at the core and what sits on the periphery? Also, what mechanisms are in place to ensure that the standard setting process remains inclusive and addresses not just private sector interests? So, if you can throw some, experiences out there, Dr. Vata.
Thank you very much, question. It is effective to create a landscape about technical and SDO activity to clarify the core and around the standardization items. Item to standardization should be prioritized for users' convenience, and items such as interoperability, compatibility, quality, and security would be essential. However, when a new service created, there are cases in which a rule home to enclose business by technology first and according to the intention of the providers. I believe that the private sector should develop rules to ensure safe and secure use of the service and the solutions from user perspective, and that result will be a business expansion. Thank you very much.
No, no, no. The battery's been replaced. Can we have the mic, please?
Yeah, I think it's back now. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you, Dr. Iwata, for your views. Let me turn to Jacques to it now and ask him. 5G clearly has defined a new imperative for the data center business. With greater data consumption, India being one of the largest data consumers, more connections and more data is getting transacted across servers, leading to some what people call data explosion actually happening. So, how are data centers prepared for 5G? And what do you think is the impact 5G and 6G in future are going to have on this infrastructure? And also, is how is sustainability being hard coded into the standards for the data center? You are muted, sir.
Sorry. Thank you for the question. So everything is good right now on the data center business. As you mentioned, it's growing. There's an explosion in there. So the first thing is that we're seeing new data centers being built, current data centers being expanded. So the overall 5G is really, and this new, I would say, combined with the pandemic, it accelerated a lot of the development of the digital services. So as I mentioned before, it's moving closer and closer to the edge. So we're starting to see a distribution of the computing capability to, you know, locate it to the more efficient place for both the end users and the operators of the networks. Uh, we're seeing all the big players defining new regions, new zones to be able to serve their customers with better efficiency. We're starting to see smaller data centers being built at cell sites themselves, so at the bottom of towers. So as we're seeing, the at 5G has been designed as a virtual core from the start, so it's got to run in data centers. And with the all the Open RAN and other virtual RAN initiatives, it's moving closer and closer to the edge. We're preparing also in the standards for an increase in the computing resources, so potentially higher density of computing inside the data centers, which will drive new cooling capabilities. So starting to make adding sections to look at liquid cooling that is becoming is being considered by more and more data centers owners right now. Looking also at improving the data center availability and reliability. You know, we're seeing many data centers that are now better aligning with the standards to make sure that they have the level of reliability that is required by their end users. Looking into evolution into the 5G advanced and the 6G, we're going to see more and more distributed computing. We're going to see higher speed connectivity within the data centers to make sure that the data center itself contributes as little as possible to the delays in the processing of the signal. Increased resiliency, not only at the data center level, but at the computing level across data centers, you know, making sure where the data centers are becoming more and more resilient, especially in the with the considerations we have right now with all kinds of environmental disasters that are happening everywhere. We need to be able to still provide connectivity. So it's having very resilient data centers, but also a very resilient network of data centers. The data centers is moving towards a software-defined data centers, so being able to reconfigure to support all those new services, a lot more automation as well. You know, as 5G is looking into to be able to adapt to the services and the traffic that is going on. So all of those things are really driving a lot of changes and evolution in data center standards and the data centers industry.
Thank you, Jack. Really, data centers is going to be, I think, very important as we start this journey of data and too much data actually being used now. Related to that, let me turn to Dr. Casey Koo. So we just heard about the data explosion which is happening. You know that the entire standardization process focusing on really having a very reliable connectivity technology. Given that we are going to have more and more new cases, and also that these are going to accelerate the digital economy going ahead, uh, how the standards have standards being created to ensure that the consumers and the enterprise customers pay more or invest more for reliable connectivity? Any thoughts on that? Also, what are your experiences on this from Korea, which is already a very highly industrialized as well as a very highly connected society? Dr. Koo?
Thank you. Thank you very much for very nice question. Your first question for first is a very, I think that a very difficult question. We until the last 5G, we have made it possible to increase the data transmission rate and launch various services based on the mobile communication system through the standards. In that sense, standards also have also as trust. We are sharing to standardization on 6D these days and hearing about the hyperconnectivity and trustworthiness and resilience in the communication system. I think that from this perspective, I think the time has come for standard to provide reliability beyond just performance. This will be a new challenge for all of us in pushing for a long journey to the 6G standards. The second one, in Korea, statistically, total 5G subscriber reached around 36 million as of August 2022, accounting for 35% of total mobile subscription in South Korea. However, the level of killer application, I already said that, for business to business 5G services is still unclear. Now is not the key to invest in the more fancier technology to achieve 20 times the performance of the 4G. Anyway, for highly industrialized and connected society, we have to expand the 5G era. Korea mobile operator increasingly turn their eyes to new business and killer application. I think it could be beyond the telecommunication area, as beyond the 5G services expand into various fields, reliable connections will become more important. So I think that multi-phase standardization activity will be needed for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Casey. Thanks a lot. Shinhui, the series, Shinhui Wong, the series of 3GPP's 5G releases laid out the standards for the EMBB, MMTC, and URLC. Do you think the standards have now matured and are now seeing the light of the day in case of market deployments of the 5G? Or do you think still we are in a process of panning this out correctly? And also, do you think the 6G will expand onto the 5G frameworks, or we are going to see fresh architecture being considered there?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the two questions. In the interest of time, I just want to make my answer quite brief. On the first one, I would say, just as I said, nothing is 100% perfect. The 3BP, I would say the whole industry has been doing a very good job. Reached 15, 16, 17, and now we are on the way to 18. Okay, it will be done by the end of next year. That's good. And meanwhile, we can see, just like you mentioned at the very beginning, we have more than 130 countries around the world are deploying the 5G network. So from this perspective, I tend to say, yes, the standard, at least the stage one standard of 5G is mature enough to do something for the good of human society, for the good of verticals, for the good of whatever thing. That's for sure. But the stage two of 5G standard, for instance, is 18, 19, 20, I would say, will keep evolving to do something more for this, I would say, digital economy, whatever. That's my takeaway of the first one. And second one on the connection, I would say the relationships between 6G and 5G, that's quite good. I would say the success of 5G is the prerequisite of 6G. Otherwise, nobody will be interested in doing something in 6G. We will show them this continuous evolution of wireless technology is real, is profitable, is something can do us a lot of good. So from this perspective, I would say at least you can see see something very interesting in the report of ITUR, which was published in June of this year, which is the first vision report of 6G. We call it 6G, okay, but they use the term IMT 2030, but just let's say 6G. And then they just pictured us a quite comprehensive, I would say, toolkit of 6G, from satellite to terrestrial, with a lot of, I would say, native characteristics of this wireless communication system. For instance, artificial intelligence and something else. And you still can see some continued evolution of the existing technology in 5G. For instance, multiple antennas. They're doing some involvement from 128 to 256. And on top of this, people are still looking at some possibility to squeeze the capability, the opportunity of the technology to make it ultra reliable, ultra low latency, and even be capable of supporting 100 kilometers per hour, the speed, the mobility, something like this. So, totally, I would say yes. 5G and 6G would be like a continuation of a successful paradigm of this whole industry. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. Thanks a lot. Dr. Karandikar, let me now turn back to you. Uh, uh, India has been a relatively new player in the telecom standard game, but we have had our early successes already. We are aware that the 5GI was also, approved as a standard by ITU, even though finally we decided on the 3GPP standard. My question is to you, sir, is more towards the future now. What should be our goals for harmonization, as we start looking ahead? And how do we balance also the commercial viability, of the networks, given that there might be disparate standards, which might still be being discussed. So really, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think, and I mentioned that through TSDSI, we are also playing an important role in 3GPP towards 6G development. In the last 8, 9 years or so, we have built a good ecosystem of entities and organizations and players who are now taking keen interest in contributing towards standard development activities, taking Indian requirements, Indian IPRs to the standard bodies. And we will work with all international players and organizations and SDOs to see that how these requirements can be harmonized with other requirements and get it into the standard so that it benefits all. India remains, as you know, one of the largest markets, and not only in terms of providing the broadband capabilities, but also in terms of other applications which are now going beyond, as Dirk mentioned, just not just telecom operators, but it is also affecting, other use cases, and almost, each sector of economy, transportation, agriculture, healthcare, broadcasting, retail. And there is really a big market in India, given our vast population and geographical reach. And we would like to see that these technologies are deployed in a cost-effective commercial manner, so that it benefits the society and the nation in all economic sectors. And we would be happy to work with all SDOs here. We are in this panel. We have very distinguished speakers from various SDOs, and we would be really happy to work with them towards developing technology and standards which benefits all of us. So I think that's all I would say is we would aspire for.
Thank you, Dr. Karandikar. Before I, given that paucity, before I wind up, I will not lose this opportunity to Pamela to also answer a question. So, Pamela, you have had this experience, this road and journey now, and how this. I just want to understand how has this experience been, and really what are the priorities, for you, particularly in harmonization, as we start going ahead.
So we were new players in this game of standards. We really didn't know the rules. Uh, we were trying to understand the written rules, but we realized that the unwritten rules are more important than the written rules, right? And it took us a while to understand this ecosystem. From what I understand, our proponents of these technologies actually started this journey way back before TSDSI was formed, way back in 2008 or something. In the 4G standards, they were trying to incorporate some of these innovations for rural broadband. And then, as a part of their efforts, this platform of TSDSI, it was realized that maybe we need to have an STO. And through this SDO, it was also there was a broadening of perspective that there is an interplay between ITU and 3GPP. ITU looks at requirements and is more country specific. So if you have national priorities and country standards, maybe it's a good idea to start at ITU to get your requirements, and then bring the technologies to 3GPP along with that. So I think we've tried various things, and at least through 5GI we found one recipe. Okay, and finally, if we were able to get convergence. They were in a country like India, can never be convergence in the beginning, right? We are too diverse. We always start with diversity and divergence and all multi-dimensional opinions, right? It's not like just one side and two sides. There are not two sides, there are multiple sides, okay, and multiple dimensions. And the whole journey of bringing that consensus has been very, very interesting, and a huge learning, I think, for all of us, including our partners. Our partners also came with their perspectives and their reactions, and in every single meeting there'll be something new and surprising that will come, a totally new perspective, and then we'll all go back, dwell over it, try to find a way to move forward. And quarter by quarter, quarter by quarter, starting from 2017 till 2022, it's been a very interesting big journey, long journey. But I think now we all have a better understanding of each other. And I would say that some of our partners, who are present on this panel, they actually helped us a lot, right? So not more offline than online. Outside the meetings, in the coffee breaks, as they say, they were the ones who sat down with us, helped us to understand how this game is played and what we need to do to be able to progress. So I think it's really been a collective effort, and persistence has been the name of the game. We have to persist, and then your voice will be heard. And I think that's the biggest learning. And 6G is much, much more diverse by the definition of it. 5G started the journey of diversifying the standards from just being telecom centric to getting into all kinds of verticals, and 6G is going to explode on that. So the divergence of bringing all the networks, as they're saying, all the different type of networks are getting converged here. All the different type of application spaces are getting converged here. All the different building blocks of technologies. Yeah, what is IT and what is communication, nobody knows anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's all one convergence. Artificial intelligence, robotics, drones, everything is converging into one. So all the technologies are converging. The amount of diverse players and stakeholders that need to come together is huge. So this journey of harmonization and this lesson of harmonization, I think, is very valuable for all of us. And we are really happy to be part of this ecosystem. Thank you very much for all your support.
Thank you, Pamela. I'm sure in future, actually, I have an idea that you should collaborate with SDOs and Mr. Tyagi, Mr. Mittal, Professor Madan. You should actually one day actually write down this entire journey, because it's been such a learning curve for us as a country to do it. And thank you again to all the panelists who have been up, some of them very late into the evening now. So thank you to all the panelists. Really appreciate your views, and look forward to working in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rahul and Pamela. In the interest of time, I would request that questions from in the room can please be posed to the panelists during the dinner. And questions that are coming on online tool will be posed to the panelists separately. Thank you very much for joining us on this meeting time and joining us on the panel. May I request Pamela to please felicitate Mr. Rahul Vats.
Okay, here is to a sustainable 6G. Harmonized 6G by the
2030 to become.
Yeah.
we take a picture.
Yeah.
With the panelists.
Yeah.
So we need to get all the panelists.
So can all the panelists be please projected on the screen?
I think we need them on this screen. In a grid mode, yeah. We can't get more than 4 in one. We can get 6, I think. Huh? Can we get more?
Airmeet tool, can we get all the 6 panelists on the grid?
Yeah, all the 7 panelists. Can we get them? You don't have that option.
Airmeet tool, can we get more than 4?
Multiple pictures then.
Yeah, and then we'll
Another
collate.
set,
Yeah.
Let's bring the other 4 and have another set. No, they haven't done that.
All photoshopping offline.
Yeah.
So can we have the other panelists now in the focus? Professor Karandikar, Dr. Weiler, and Dr. Wong in the focus.
Yeah, no.
No, he's taking them off one by one.
Oh, so they go one by one, then they come one by one. Okay.
There's no bulk calling.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need a standard for this.
Thank you.
Dirk Weiler didn't come. Did we get Dirk Weiler on the panel in the focus? One more photograph, please, with Dirk. Yeah. Now, there was a lag.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much.